The relentless pounding of a drum shattered the early morning silence, signaling the squad to wake up. Incred stirred, groggy from sleep, only to hear another sound beside his bed, Rim, fussing over something in his boot. Once a rising warrior, Incred had been reduced to leading this band of misfits, a demotion earned through past failures. Later that day, he stood on the battlefield, fighting with all his might. He possessed no special talent, no extraordinary power to set him apart, only the relentless training that had carried him this far. His dream of becoming a knight burned within him, even as others mocked him for it. But now, in this final battle, exhaustion consumed him. Defeated and broken, he felt the cold slice of a blade against his throat. He had never imagined such a pitiful end. Yet, as if fate had played a cruel joke, he awoke once more to the same pounding drum, the same fussing Remington. A sense of déjà vu gripped him before the horrifying realization struck. He was trapped in an unending cycle, forced to relive this doomed day over and over again. For the 17th time, Incred felt the cold steel of a blade pierce his body, his life slipping away once more. And for the 18th time, he awoke to the familiar sound of pounding drums, signaling the start of yet another day in this inescapable cycle of death and rebirth. As he stirred, Rem greeted him, noting in surprise that he had woken up earlier than usual. Incred barely acknowledged him, his mind already consumed by the futility of his existence. "There was a bug in your boot," Incred told Rim, who was shaking the boot upside down. The small creature tumbled onto the ground, only to be crushed beneath Rim's heel. Incred stared at it, thinking to himself that this was the 18th time he had seen the same bug die. He turned his gaze to the window, his mind clouded with the same thought that haunted him every morning. When would he finally survive the battle awaiting him later in the day? His thoughts drifted to the past, to the childhood dream that had shaped his existence. He had picked up a sword since he was a boy. His first lessons in swordsmanship came from an old mercenary who had passed through his village by chance. The mercenary had seen something in him and had predicted that he would one day become a knight. That was all it took to ignite a fire within Incred's heart. He had dreamed of becoming a knight so powerful who could slay 1,000 enemies single-handedly and turn the tide of battle. He aspired to be the legendary figure known as the Knight of the End. Determined to fulfill this vision, he joined the Mercenary Corps. However, it didn't take long for harsh reality to crush his optimism. Unlike the heroes of legend, he possessed no extraordinary talent, no innate gifts that set him apart. His seniors mocked him, laughing when they saw him trip and fall while being chased by a stray dog. Yet, he refused to give up. If he lacked talent, then he would compensate with effort. Hard work, he believed, would never betray him. For 10 years, while others rested or ate, Incred trained. His days and nights were spent honing his swordsmanship, his body growing stronger with every passing year. Eventually, he had carved out a place for himself in the mercenary ranks. But just as he began to believe he was making progress, his confidence was shattered once again. A 12-year-old boy from the village he was stationed in, one who had been training for only 6 months, challenged him to a duel. To Incred's humiliation, the boy defeated him with ease. In that moment, he understood the cruel truth. 10 years of relentless effort were nothing in the face of true genius. Was his dream unattainable? Would he never become a knight? Yet, despair did not consume him. If he could not be a knight, then he would be the most experienced soldier. And so, with renewed determination, he pressed forward. 3 years later, his efforts bore fruit. He had climbed the ranks within the Cyprus Division, rising to become the commander of 4 second-rate squad, though still beneath the level of platoons and companies. But it was better than being a mere wandering mercenary. Now, trapped in the endless cycle of death and rebirth, he continued his daily routine. He stepped out of his quarters and called upon Jackson to take over his morning duties. Jackson, ever arrogant, scoffed but agreed, on the condition that Incred would repay the favor someday. Rem, watching the exchange, asked Incred if he had noticed Jackson's expression, but Incred brushed it aside. Instead, he turned to Rem and asked him to teach him the heart of the beast once again. Rem was taken aback. "Haven't you already given up on that?" he asked, but Incred remained firm. Later that day, the battle between Celilia and Aspen unfolded once more, the battlefield where Incred had died countless times before. Attempt after attempt, he had tried to wield the heart of the beast, but each time, he failed. He was cut down again and again. By the 21st cycle, however, something had changed. He had memorized the sequence of every attack thrown his way. He moved through the battlefield with precision, dodging every deadly blow. His first goal had been achieved. Now, only one obstacle remained. The warrior who had slain him 20 times before as the swordsman charged at him. Incred's mind raced back to Rem's words. The secret to mastering the heart of the beast is to face death with open eyes. To abandon fear, just as a beast does. This time, Incred was certain he had done it. He had become the beast. And yet somehow, he was cut down once again as he lay dying. He heard the same voices whispering to him, urging him to surrender, but he refused. He had dodged that fatal strike after 20 attempts. He would not give up now. And so, when he awoke to the familiar sound of drums for the 22nd time, greeted once more by Rem's usual words, he was ready. This time, he would challenge fate once again. Chapter 02 for the 33rd time. Incred found himself standing on the battlefield. He had memorized every attack that would come his way, every movement of his enemies. He was certain that this time, he had mastered it all. Yet, when the inevitable moment arrived and the lethal blow came for him, he still failed. He tried to dodge, but his attacker was too fast. The blade pierced his body once again, and as he collapsed onto the ground, the amulet around his neck slipped from him, landing beside him in IRT. His fading vision locked onto the small trinket, and suddenly, memories surged through his mind, memories of his mercenary days. He had once taken on requests to subjugate monsters, not because he was forced to, but because the villagers who sought his help were poor and desperate, and a knight, he believed, was meant to protect the weak. Though he had not yet earned the title, he had always lived by that principle. Among those he had helped, an old man had once gifted him this amulet, saying it would grant the wish he most desired. As he lay dying once more, Incred couldn't shake the thought. Was this amulet the reason he was trapped in this endless loop? Was he destined to relive this day until he truly became a knight? His attacker loomed over him, smirking. "Do you want mercy?" he asked. Incred forced a weak grin. "You're just a pervert who enjoys stabbing people," he spat, refusing to give an even in death. And then, for the 34th time, he awoke to the same morning. This time, before Rem could even say a word, Incred told him, "I put a bug in your shoe." Rem blinked in surprise. "Why are you starting your day with pranks? Stop talking and teach me the heart of the beast." Incred cut in. They went outside to spar. Incred dodged Rem's attacks, but midway through, Rem suddenly halted, his expression puzzled. He reached out, pressing his fingers against Incred's chest. "Your skin over your heart, it's hardened." "How is this possible?" Incred shrugged. "Maybe it's from all the training I've been doing lately." But Rem wasn't convinced. "You can't harden your skin in a few days. Are you sure you didn't know family secret?" Incred replied, "Maybe I learned it by chance." They resumed their sparring, and this time, Incred tried using the Valen mercenary sword technique, a technique others dismissed as petty, but among all the ones he knew, it was the most reliable for him. Yet, even this failed. Growing frustrated, he attempted to imitate the exact way he was stabbed by his battlefield opponent. He couldn't quite get it right, but Rem's eyes widened in surprise. "You almost had it," he muttered. "That was the best move you've done so far. But the problem is, you don't trust your own swordsmanship. If you want to use that technique, you need complete confidence. No matter what attack comes your way, you have to hold your sword firmly." Rem's explanation was messy, but Incred understood. From that day forward, he focused on believing in his own skills. On the 111th day, he failed. That on the 123rd, he still hadn't reached the end. On the 124th, his hand was suddenly slick with blood, not from a fatal wound, but from gripping his sword too tightly. Rem looked at him in concern, but Incred only laughed, a wild, triumphant sound, because at last, he had done it. He had mastered the technique, and now, nothing would stop him from defeating his stabber. On the battlefield, Incred again stood firm, gripping his sword tightly. He had mastered the skill, memorized every incoming attack, and prepared himself for this moment. He was certain, if he moved fast and held his sword firmly, he could win this battle. But confidence alone wasn't enough. His first attempt ended in failure. His enemy, swift and relentless, pressed a blade to his throat. "Do you want some mercy?" the man sneered before driving his sword straight through Incred's throat. As the world faded into darkness, Incred choked out his final words, "I'll see you tomorrow." The man chuckled. "There won't be any tomorrow. You're going to die." But the next morning, Incred woke up again, just as he always did. This time, As Rem fussed over his boots, Incred smirked. "I saw a bug crawling inside your shoe earlier." Rem, surprised, thanked him. Instead of acknowledging it, Incred simply ordered, "Do my morning duty." Rem was stunned. He wasn't used to hearing such a direct command from Incred. Once outside, Incred, marking this as the 125th day, turned to Big Eyes and ordered him to bring a shin armor, a shield, and a dagger. "I'll pay you for it," he assured. Though confused, Big Eyes obeyed. After all, Incred was the boss, and he had never gone back on his word that as he left. Murmurs spread among the squad. Rem and the other soldiers exchanged glances, whispering about Incred's sudden change in demeanor. They had never seen him so intense before. Jason smirked. "And here I thought it was you, Rem, who always forced your squad commander to do your tasks." Rem glared. "Unless you want a taste of my axe, shut it." Meanwhile, Incred reflected on his journey. The pain of death had been unbearable each time, yet with each repetition, he had grown stronger. But was strength alone enough? No, he had to push past his limits. He had to master the art of the stab. Incred had never possessed natural talent, but he had made it this far through 3 unwavering principles: preparation, luck, and a cool head that he knew what attacks were coming his way. On the 46th day, his shoulder had been shattered by a spiked mace, so on the 47th, he rolled to dodge it, only to have his head split open instead. That's when he realized he had to add a spin to his movement. On the 71st day, a soldier cut off his foot, leaving him helpless against the stabber. On the 89th day, an axe had been hurled at him, splitting his skull. Now, after surviving over 100 of today, he had finally mastered every attack that had once killed him. He knew exactly when to throw his weapon, how to counter each move, and how to seize his moment. The battle began. Incred moved effortlessly, overcoming every strike, every attack that once ended his life. Then, from behind, a sharpshooter known as Claw of the Hawk took position. But Incred had no time to deal with him. His target was his stabber. Charging straight at the man, he locked eyes with him. Their swords clashed. The enemy struck first, but this time, Incred dodged with ease, never once losing grip on his blade. Up close, Incred realized something. The man was just an ordinary soldier. Yet his strength made him seem like a prodigy. However, his lack of experience was his weakness. If Incred did something unexpected, he could unsettle him. That's when he decided he would use the Valen Mercenary technique. The moment he executed it, his opponent faltered. Within minutes, Incred shattered his sword. The man dropped to his knees. Incred raised his blade. "This," he said coldly, "is what mercy looks like." With a swift motion, he slit his throat. For the first time, he had broken through the wall that had held him back. But he had made a mistake. He hadn't accounted for Claw of the Hawk. An arrow flew toward him. Incred was too focused on his victory to react, but Rem wasn't. With incredible precision, Rem hurled his axe, shattering the arrow mid-air before it could reach Incred. Incred, standing over his fallen opponent, exhaled deeply. He had finally done it. But then, he never anticipated Frog. The moment he noticed him, it was too late. Frog sent something hurtling toward him, striking him with force. Before Incred could react, his body gave out, and he collapsed onto the ground. Before Incred could react to the attack, Frog was already upon him again, his axe poised to strike. His expression twisted with rage as he spat. "Do you have any idea how much effort I put into training that soldier you just killed?" But before the blow could land, Rem stepped in, intercepting the attack with his own weapon. "Who gave you permission to harm my squad commander?" Rem's voice was firm. Frog narrowed his eyes. How could someone as trivial as him be a squad commander? Shouldn't a stronger man like you be leading instead? Rem didn't flinch. "That doesn't concern you," he said coldly, ready to fight for Incred. Frog hesitated. Fighting Rem over this wasn't worth the risk. With a scoff, he pulled back. "This isn't worth it," he muttered before retreating into the chaos of the battlefield. Rem smirked. "Coward." But the danger wasn't over. As Rem turned to fend off another attacker, a soldier rushed toward Incred, lance in hand, aiming to finish him off. Before the strike could land, Jackson stepped in, shielding Incred and countering the attack. As he fought off the soldier, another enemy approached from behind. But before the blade could touch Jackson, Auden intervened, swiftly cutting the assailant down. The entire 4th squad had surrounded Incred, not only fighting off enemy soldiers, but also shielding each other as they fought to protect their badly wounded commander. Then, the order to retreat was given. Jackson didn't hesitate. He hauled Incred onto his back, and the squad began their retreat. On the way back, as the sounds of battle faded behind them, Incred drifted into unconsciousness. In the depths of his mind, a shadowed figure appeared before him. "You may have survived today," the voice murmured, "but many more walls lie ahead. This is your fate, to suffer and despair for all eternity." Incred clenched his fists, glaring at the figure. "I will never give up." The shadow chuckled darkly. "I eagerly await the day when your ambition and greed turn to despair. That day will never come," Incred declared. The shadow faded. When he opened his eyes again, he was covered in white bandages. Rem was sitting beside him. "You've been out for 2 days," Rem informed him. Incred glanced around, realizing he was in the infirmary tent. "You're lucky," Rem continued. "None of your bones are broken, but according to the doctor, your brain was shaken up pretty badly." Then, smirking, he added, "So, do you remember who saved you from Frog?" Incred barely acknowledged the question. His mind was elsewhere. "I survived Frog's attack," he muttered to himself. Rem leaned forward. "And do you remember me? Your best friend forever." Incred raised a brow. "When did you ever become my friend?" Rem gasped dramatically, covering his mouth. "How could you blurt out such a secret so casually of someone else who had nothing to do with you?" Incred then added, "You need to make a choice. Am I your best friend, or just someone?" Rem then left the tent. Incred exhaled, staring at the ceiling. This was a new day, one beyond the endless cycle of repetition. He had survived it, that a voice from the next bed over interrupted his thoughts. "You owe me 3 times the effort I put into getting you back here," Kryze remarked lazily. Incred turned his head. "I didn't see you anywhere on the battlefield." Kryze cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, I was there. I'll give you a special discount. Just pay me back double." Incred rolled his eyes. Later, Jackson walked in and tossed a box of ointment at him. "Use it twice a day, morning and night," he instructed before walking away. Incred looked at the box, recognizing it immediately. It was Jackson's own ointment, the one he always used himself. The thing was, Jackson hated sharing. For him to willingly give it to Incred was strange. Sometime later, Incred noticed Auden sitting beside him, silent tears rolling down his face as he muttered a quiet prayer. "I'm fine," Incred said. "You can stop worrying." Auden wiped his eyes quickly and left without another word. Incred sighed, watching the way his squad had been acting around him. Were they really that concerned about him? They had never listened to his orders so obediently before that a familiar figure entered the tent. Ragna. Ragna looked at him for a brief moment. "What are you doing here?" Incred asked. Ragna didn't answer. Without a word, he turned and left. Incred frowned. "Is Ragna actually worried about me?" Ragna never cared about anyone. Why would he now? The next morning, as Incred surveyed his surroundings, he noticed 2 other soldiers in the tent. One was a platoon commander from another company, someone he had fought with often. When their eyes met, the man scowled. "What the hell are you looking at?" The second soldier was of a much lower rank, sitting quietly, staring blankly into space. Incred didn't even know his name. Then, the tent flaps opened, and a commanding presence entered, the company commander. The entire infirmary fell silent, every soldier inside instinctively straightening. Her presence alone was enough to command awe. Her eyes swept over the room before she spoke. "Who among you is the commander of the 4th Squad?"